Seth Lugo made his first start of the spring today, but I'm going to look ahead to the regular season. What can we expect from the Royals right-hander? Let's find out in this edition of Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can give me a follow on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. We are also very easy to find on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Odyssey, and we're on YouTube. We're now over 1,100 subscribers, so those numbers keep going up. I thank you, the listener and the follower, for all of that. Our goal is to get to 1,200, by opening day 2024. Now, I know over the weekend we had 2 episodes. They weren't available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, all those podcasting platforms. Now you can find Sunday's episode on there. I believe just got that published before we went live tonight. So if there's any issues there, just shoot me a message over on Twitter. Let me know on YouTube. But we're not going to have any more problems moving forward. Every single episode that we have is going to be available on every single platform. It will not be hard to listen to Locked On Royals. And as always, for the new listeners out there, we want to give a little bit of an introduction to me, what I may be doing. I work here in Kansas City at Sports Radio 810 WHB. Got a show once a week over there. Got a show Monday through Friday on ESPN Kansas City, also produced on ESPN Wichita. So I stay pretty busy in the sports world. But when it comes to this podcast, when it comes to Royals baseball, you know exactly what you are getting for 30 straight minutes, Monday through Friday. Unless I'm sick or I'm out of town, I have to pivot a little bit, have to do only 3 or 4 episodes a week. Traditionally, we're going to be doing 5 episodes a week, Monday through Friday. Most of those episodes coming during the nighttime, so should have a more routine schedule moving forward. Again, questions and comments can always be sent on the YouTube channel or over to my Twitter handle at JohnnyJ_15. And today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. I keep telling you, March Madness is right around the corner. The conference tournament's right around the corner. NBA, though, is in full swing. So if you want to start placing some bets now on those NBA games, get comfortable, FanDuel is the place to do it. Go and create your account, mention that Locked On sent you, and start winning some money today. Well, the Royals, for the second straight day in a row, pitched a shutout. I get it, spring training. I had a rant on Sunday about what you can and cannot take away. Well, we're going to talk about both the starters over the last 2 days. Cole Ragans coming up in our second segment. Seth Lugo to kick off the show today. And then a little bit later on, we're going to talk about the X Factor. But throughout this week, going to be a lot of evaluation about what we see in these spring training games. And that's why I'm so excited to go into Cole Ragans' start. Oh, my goodness. I know I'm biting my tongue about what you can take away from spring training, but it was hard not to be impressed with what Cole Ragans did to the Angels on live television. You were able to actually watch that game in person, unlike today's game, and that was something to watch, even if it was for just 2 innings. But for Seth Lugo today, I thought it was funny that the 2 innings he threw were like exactly what I predict a Seth Lugo start to look like over the course of like 5 or 6 innings. Like nothing special. I'm not going into the year expecting Seth Lugo to be this elite top-end guy. He's going to have 8, 9, 10 strikeouts every single time he grabs the ball. No, I'd imagine that you're going to see a lot of 5, 6 inning outings where he's got about 5 strikeouts. He may give up a run or 2 or 3, sometimes 4, but he stays very mellow. Like nothing that Seth Lugo is going to do is going to jump off the screen, other than his spin rate on his curveball, which is among the best in Major League Baseball. But he is somebody that was brought in to be this, just to be a stabilizer, to be somebody that you can count on every single 5th day. And did the Royals have to overpay? I mean, it kind of comes into account what you think is an overpay. I've always believed that pitching is something you have to overpay for. The Royals are a team that are constantly going to have to, pony up to get guys here until the winning starts happening and until the stars start flooding into Kansas City. Right now, yeah, you're going to have to give that extra million or two or that extra year on the contract. And that's the way I kind of saw it go down with Seth Lugo. When I was in Surprise, Seren Petro and I over at 810, we're talking with Seth Lugo, and he mentioned that, there were 5 teams that he was seriously interested in, but he always felt like Kansas City was the best fit. I think that came down to the money that was involved, but also where he'd be in the rotation. I don't think he wanted to go be a number 4, number 5. I think he wanted to be in the top half of the rotation, which is exactly where he's going to be in Kansas City. But this is a guy that you would basically concoct in a lab to be your number 3. Like, to me, Seth Lugo is the stereotypical number 3 in a rotation. Not going to jump off the screen, not going to look electric. You just want quality start after quality start. And I believe he had 17 or 18 last year. I mean, exactly what the Royals are looking for. He's a strike thrower. I didn't think his command, at least it sounded like it. I was following along on MLB, the Game Day app. No, he hit a batter, he walked somebody, but he got through 2 innings, no runs allowed. Now, to backpedal on that, remember, I don't care about numbers. I don't care about stats in spring training, especially for guys like Seth Lugo. I just want Seth Lugo to get out healthy. I want Seth Lugo's stuff to look good. You move on, you put him in bubble wrap, get ready for the regular season. Now, I'd imagine we're going to see him start 4 to 5 more times over the course of these 4 weeks or so. But it was just something that made me chuckle today, that's exactly the type of start that I expect Seth Lugo to have a lot this season, where it's not overly impressive, won't have too many strikeouts, not going to walk many guys, but he's just going to get you the outs that you need. He's going to get you the quality start. And I'm not really overly concerned about him only having one really good season, and I'll say pretty good season, as a starter last year in San Diego. I'm not overly concerned about the inning workload that he had. He talked about it and surprised that he set a goal for himself already, and he'll let everybody know at the end of the season if he reached that goal about the number of innings he wants to throw. I can tell you this, it's a heck of a lot more than 135 or 140, whatever he was at in San Diego. But I think overall, you're looking at a guy that evens out everything. Like, Cole Ragans takes you to the next level, right? That's a no-brainer. Cole Ragans takes a rotation to the next level. I think even Michael Wacha at times can surprise you with the strikeout numbers. I remember the start he had at Petco Park against the Royals last year. He took a perfect game, wasn't it, into the 7th or the 8th inning before Michael Massey broke it up. Those numbers can pop to you. When he gets that changeup going, there's something to like a lot about Michael Wacha. But Seth Lugo, I think he's just going to be that stabilizer. I think it's the best word I can use to describe him. You throw a lot of strikes. You don't need to miss a ton of bats. I'm not looking for 18, 19, 20 whiffs in a game. I'll expect that from Cole Ragans. But for Seth Lugo and what he needs to do, grab the ball every 5th day. Give me 6 innings of 3-run ball every single time out. That's all I'm asking for. If you can keep the pitch count low, I'd imagine he's going to get into that 160, 165 innings pitched range. Maybe he can get up into the 170 range. But I also am realistic. I know both Wacha and Lugo are not coming off of high inning seasons. They were around the 130s to 140s, and that's why, in some cases, their numbers looked pretty good. Their ERAs were pretty low. But I would also go back to the fact that you had a level of consistency with these guys, which is exactly what J.J. Picollo and John Sherman sought out to get. They wanted to get Seth Lugo. They wanted to get Michael Wacha. And it was fun covering that pandemonium and free agency. There was so much smoke behind Seth Lugo. And I remember going on a podcast episode and saying, this feels a lot like the Kenta Maeda deal in Detroit, where everybody was saying they're very interested. They're a finalist for Kenta Maeda. And then lo and behold, a day or two later, Kenta Maeda is a Tiger. And I said, there's so much smoke for Seth Lugo going to the Royals that there's got to be a fire somewhere. Lo and behold, a day or two later, Seth Lugo is a Royal. I think he's exactly what you need in this rotation. And today, it was just one outing of 5 he's probably going to have. He was healthy. He didn't have any spiraling innings. The only spiraling inning I've seen this spring has been from Jake Brentz. Other than that, we've had some pretty impressive outings from guys. The Royals have thrown 18 consecutive scoreless innings. It's spring training. I get it. But it's better than giving up 20 runs in your last 18 innings. It's better than giving up 30 runs. Like, they're just getting outs. And, for veterans, work on your stuff, work on things you want to try a little bit more before the regular season and get yourself in game shape and ready to go. I think Seth Lugo would tell you feels pretty good about what he looked like today in the win against the Chicago Cubs. I believe the Royals won that game 6-0, 1-0 the day before against the Los Angeles Angels. Tomorrow, it'll be Daniel Lynch on the bump. He'll get his second start of spring training, and then it'll be Brady Singer going on Wednesday, still to be determined on Thursday and Friday who the starter might be. But I'd imagine before the weekend is over, we are going to see both Jordan Lyles and Michael Wacha get a start down there in either Surprise, Tempe, Peoria, Goodyear, wherever they may be playing over the next couple of days. I know I'm already kind of blanking on who they have tomorrow. I know Seattle's one of the games. They might get the White Sox or Angels again. I always, mix and match a lot of teams in the Cactus League. But Royals baseball, once again, coming your way tomorrow, but hard not to be impressed with 18 consecutive scoreless outings and no problems at all with what we saw from Seth Lugo in outing number 1 of spring training. Okay, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, let's dive into what Cole Ragans did to the Angels on Sunday. I get it. Spring training numbers don't matter, but stuff and health does to me. And I'm going to go over everything from what we saw in those 2 innings from Cole Ragans coming up on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. Be sure to give me a follow on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. And catch us on wherever you get your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, and we are on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. Before we go any further, want to give a shout out to the title sponsor today in FanDuel. Now, with FanDuel, you can get buckets with your first bet with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Now, I'm going to keep harping on this. If you're not as comfortable betting on the NBA, you're not as familiar with it, there's lots of things to bet on. There's going to be a lot of things to bet on coming up in March, not just Major League Baseball, but March Madness right around the corner. That's going to be one of the busiest times to start placing some bets. I strongly encourage people to go out there and place those prop bets. Those are fun to watch, keep you engaged with the game, and you're not worrying about winners and losers in that. You're worrying about guys scoring, assist totals, rebounds. Maybe you want to bet on the over-under, how many points are going to be scored in the game. Very easy to win money there. Maybe I shouldn't say very easy, but if you're good at it, it probably does come pretty easy to you. So with March Madness right around the corner, start gearing up, go over to FanDuel, and create your account today. Well, I was excited yesterday that it was my first chance to see Cole Ragans throw. I saw him throw a live bullpen in Surprise last week. But again, that's a live bullpen. That's not against the team. That's against nobody. That's against a ghost hitter. That's against a coach that may be standing in there or a hitter that's got a bat on his shoulder and he's not going to swing it all. But for the most part, it was just throwing at 60, 70%, not really popping the glove. He doesn't need to go out there and let it eat at 99, 100, 101 miles an hour like we were seeing against the Angels on Sunday. But what we saw against the Angels was just my arguing point, or boosted my arguing point of why this kid needs to be the #1. And I say kid, he's older than I am. But why this guy needs to be the #1. He is ridiculously talented. He possesses stuff that few, if any, left-handers in baseball have. I would say that there are some guys that have close to his stuff, but they're bullpen guys. They are guys that'll throw anywhere from 15 to 20 pitches in an outing, sometimes less than that. Like a Tanner Scott comes to mind. Elite reliever in Miami. He's not a starter. I think of like Jesus Luzardo. I think Luzardo's got elite stuff, and he's done it more than Cole Ragans. So I'll hold off on saying Luzardo doesn't have the stuff Ragans does. But mercy. I mean, I get it's spring training, and I get it that some of these everyday guys, just like pitchers, they're going to be working on some things. So, I was working on this in the cage. I'm going to use it in the game today. I'll get 2 at bats, and we'll move on and try again tomorrow. The Angels put, I think, roughly 5 or 6 guys in their lineup that are going to be playing a lot of nights in Anaheim. They're going to have a lot of opportunities to play. I mean, Aaron Hicks, Anthony Rendon, Mike Trout, Zach Neto. There were guys that are going to be there on the opening day roster. And they were so far behind his fastball. And there's no radar gun on the broadcast. It was just going off what the Angels crew was saying. And I remember in the first inning, they were saying, he's hitting 98 and 99. But it was the way the Angels were either trying to attack Cole Ragans, their approach at the plate, how they were trying to put a good swing on the ball. Nobody did. He gave up 3 hits in those 2 innings. They were all bloops. Opposite field bloops. Like just throwing the bat head out and hoping you make contact. As for the other guys, when he had 5 strikeouts in 2 innings, 5 of his 6 outs came via the strikeout. It was so electric, so dominant, that I thought to myself, why even throw him out there again in spring? I've seen enough. This is the number 1 of the staff. This is your opening day starter. And in fact, his last pitch against the Angels was so inhuman, so ridiculously unbelievable. I can't even think of the right words to describe it. 101 miles an hour with 20 inches of induced vertical break. I mean, that's unhittable. And Neto didn't swing. It was placed in a spot that you couldn't swing. And you couldn't have even put a good swing on the ball if they told you exactly where it was going to be. And that's coming from the left side. Now, I would also say this. Cole Ragans needs to know that you don't need to be throwing triple digits in spring training. You don't want that arm to burn out or that arm to wear down. But he's also a guy now that has an incredibly high velocity. This is just how he throws. It didn't look violent. It didn't look herky-jerky. It didn't look like he was trying to just throw the hell out of the ball. It looked so easy and so smooth coming out of his hand. And it wasn't just the fastball. It was the curve. It was the slider. I mean, his first strikeout of the day on Aaron Hicks was this circle change that just dove and disappeared in the left-handed hitter's batting box. It just completely disappeared away from Aaron Hicks. And how do you expect a changeup when a guy's throwing 100, 101 from the left side? You can't. I mean, Cole Ragans is frontline stuff. He has ace stuff. And I get it. The numbers don't matter in spring training. I'm not going to go back on what I said in Sunday's episode. But if he's healthy, and this is the stuff he has, which I've got no reason to believe otherwise. It's not like we're going to get to opening day and now he's back to 95, 96 and doesn't have the movement on his fastball. If he's healthy, this is who he's going to be. I'm not overly alarmed by the injury concern here. I mean, for those that mistake it a lot, it wasn't 2 Tommy John surgeries. It was 1 Tommy John, and then he had a setback. So it was just, wasn't all repaired in there. He might have had the second surgery, but it wasn't like he had Tommy John fully recovered and then it snapped again. It was kind of a hiccup in the middle or the end, the tail end of that rehab process. So to me, yeah, I mean, something could go wrong. He could have an injury. Well, knock on wood for that. But anybody in baseball can get hurt. That's just pitchers, right? And what I'm looking at right now, it's crazy to think the Royals, in a matter of a few months, found a guy that's a dark horse to win the Cy Young for a rental reliever they had. That they signed to a 1-year deal. It wasn't even worth, I think, more than $5 million. It was less than that. They got to roll this Chapman on a cheap deal like that, flip them for Ragans, and a lottery ticket guy. And I'll end it with this, at least this segment, before we move on to our final one. I've always believed Bobby Witt Jr., at least in this era, was the greatest thing to happen to the post-championship team. The post-2015 team Bobby Witt Jr., he's the savior. He's shown that he's a superstar, locked up to a long-term deal. That's important, right? That's important the Royals hit on a draft pick. But I would rebuttal with this. Bobby Witt Jr. was the second overall pick. It was Rutschman or him. The Royals couldn't really screw that up. They were going to get a superstar because of their placement in the draft, and they got one. But why I'm starting to believe Cole Ragans can be the best thing to happen to the Royals franchise post-World Series is because he wasn't the second overall pick. He wasn't some top 100. The Royals didn't mortgage one of their stars for Cole Ragans. They found him, not even in Texas's system. He was at the major league level. He was in their bullpen. They liked something about him. They liked the spin rate on the fastball. They thought the velocity could come back if he was a full-time starter and kind of put into a specific role. And this is what they got. And the reason I say it can be the best thing that happened to this franchise post-World is because this is doable again. You can find more Cole Ragans out there. It's not like Cole Ragans looked like this in Texas. If he did, the Royals would have never had a chance to get him. But this now gives you hope with the front office, with the scouting department, that they know who to look for. Not to take anything away from what Bobby Witt Jr. has done, but he was a second overall pick. He was supposed to be good, and he's even better, I think, than people thought. Maybe he's met your expectation, but to me, this early in his career, I didn't expect him to be this good. For Ragans, I'll admit it. When the trade happened, I said, I'm just not that high on him. I didn't think that his stuff was overly powerful. He threw in the mid to low 90s. ERA wasn't good. Strikeout numbers weren't absurd. And then he had that one outing in Omaha where that velocity came back, and I went, oh, that's why they got him. And if this is the guy, and this is the stuff, he's the number one. I'm going to keep hammering on that point. I know people have disagreed with me, but I'm sorry. If you're throwing 101 with that much vertical movement, it's unhittable. That's number one stuff. And that's not just a dark horse to win the Cy Young. That's hands down top 5. Could get in the conversation of top 3. There's a lot of great pitchers in the American League. He can be one of them. There's no reason to believe otherwise. Other than if he can't go for a full season. I think the stuff's there. I think it's going to play. And to me, he's the opening day starter. What a first outing for Cole Ragans. I've seen enough. Put him in bubble wrap and get ready for opening day because you cannot pitch much better than that for your first outing of spring. Okay, before we move on to our final segment, I want to give a shout out to Locked On Sports Today. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now, available on the free Fire TV channels app. For our final segment, I'm going to tell you who the X factor of this team is. Who is the guy that can take this team to the next level? Maybe we're not talking about him enough, but we're going to talk about him next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. Be sure to give me a follow on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. Before we go any further, let's give a shout out to the other sponsor today in eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. It's what brings home the winning trophy, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Well, the last thing I wanted to dive into today, or for tonight's episode, was the X factor of the Royals. There was a good piece written on MLB.com. I'm already blanking on who the writer was for this, so I apologize on that. But it was the X factors for 10 teams that missed the playoffs last year. That came close to making it. Of course, the Royals were not in that list because why would they be? They were never close to postseason contention. They were out of it by mid-April. You're hoping, obviously, for a different outcome. This year, they got to go out and prove it, though. I can have all this optimism, talk about the good things of the Royals, talk about the fact that they're 3-1 in Cactus League play. But again, I've already told you my thoughts on spring training. I've told you what needs to happen early on in the year, how they can weather this storm in April, which always seems to nip them. I feel like you can pivot to a couple of things when looking at this team and looking at what can make them good. And there are, in all honesty, there's a handful of X factors. I would say having an above average hitter in MJ Melendez, that changes this lineup. That changes the meat of this lineup. Having Kyle Isbell become a league average hitter like he was in the second half last year, or at least the tail end of the second half, that can change the bottom of the lineup. Same thing goes for Michael Massey. Those two guys are great defensively. Batten needs to come around. Nelson Velasquez is the 30 home run guy or a 25 home run guy. Boom, X factor. I can define a lot of those guys as X factors, or I could go to the bullpen. But to me, there is one guy that takes the cake. There is one guy by far and away that is the X factor. And I think it ties into what we talked about in our first two segments. When we opened it up with Seth Lugo, I said Seth Lugo's the stabilizer, right? You know exactly what you're going to get from Seth Lugo. And then we pivot in segment 2 to Cole Ragans, how elite Cole Ragans is, how Cole Ragans can be a number 1. He's a dark horse to win the Cy Young. So I'm piecing together this rotation, right? I got Ragans as my 1. Then I got Michael Wacha as my 2. And that's not a bad number 2. He may be a lot of great teams' number 3s, but for the Royals, he's a number 2. Then Seth Lugo is my number 3. Top 3 guys in the rotation, I feel pretty good about every fifth day. Will there be bad outings? Absolutely. Even Cole Ragans is going to have a bad outing or 2 from time to time. That's just baseball. Even the greatest ones out there. Garrett Cole, he's going to get roughed up for 5 in the first. Now, you just hope he can settle in and still give you 5 innings, but that's baseball. It's a long season. You're bound to have some screw-ups. But I look at that 4th spot in the rotation, and I look at Brady Singer, a guy that will be able to see pitch on Wednesday. And I think that game is against Seattle. I want to actually double check on that before I move on here, because I know it's either Daniel Lynch or Brady Singer that's going to pitch against Seattle in the coming days here. But he's the X factor to me. He absolutely is the X factor, because unlike a Jordan Lyles, right? I'm not going to Jordan Lyles and saying, oh, he's the X factor because if he's, a guy with a 4.5 ERA, that's going to transform everything. Okay, so it is Brady Singer that throws against Gilbert, actually. Logan Gilbert on Wednesday. First pitch will be at 2:10 p.m. Central Time. I look at what Brady Singer was in 2022. I look at what he was in 2023. If you somehow got 75 to 80% of the 2022 Brady Singer, the one that made all of us Royals fans go, there's your number 1. Before Cole Ragans got here, it was Brady Singer's going to be the ace. And if you got 75 or 80% of that, and that's your number 4, that's the X factor for this team. Because not a lot of playoff teams, because I know a lot of people listening want me to talk about playoffs. How can this team get there? I had somebody ask about what the win-loss projection for me is. I'll give that on opening day, hours before first pitch. I'll do a podcast in the morning and get that up for everybody. But to me, I don't look at many playoff teams that can make it with just 3 good starters. I think you need that 4th guy. I think having 4 good starters for this team goes a long way, because they didn't have any last year until Cole Ragans got there. There wasn't a single starter in the rotation you could count on. Their guy with the lowest ERA was Greinke, and it was over 5. That was somebody that was there from opening day to the end of the season. I mean, Brady Singer has this opportunity with a full spring here and the new pitches he's developed to become what he once was. Now, if he's the same guy last year, even he had that good stretch in the second half where he was one of the top pitchers, in the rotation. But again, that's a small period of time. Cole Ragans exploded onto the scene with his 12 starts that he had. If Brady Singer can be his 2022 self for 18 to 19 of his hopefully 30 starts, I think that becomes a much more interesting team to talk about. That becomes a team people take more seriously. Because Brady Singer at one point was dubbed as a number 1 or number 2 of this team, mainly because they weren't that good. But now they've got stabilizers like Seth Lugo and Michael Walker and an ace to take them over the top in Ragans. But you add that fourth guy. You add a Brady Singer at his best, or at least 80% of his best, then he becomes that X factor. Then I don't even care what the number 5 starter looks like. Jordan Lyles could have the same numbers he did last year, because eventually he'd get booted out for Daniel Lynch or Alec Marsh or Veneziano or Jonathan Bullen. Don't really care who the starter is if you got 4 good starters, and that is all remaining to be seen, of course, because we're still a month away from opening day. Who do you believe is the X factor? Is it Brady Singer, or is it one of the guys that I mentioned before diving into that segment? Let us know in the YouTube comments, or let me know on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. Before we say goodbye, one last shout out to Locked On Sports Today. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now, available on all the free Fire TV channels app. Tomorrow, we're going to break down a little bit from what we saw with Daniel Lynch, what went on in the game against the Colorado Rockies, and maybe look ahead to that start that Brady Singer has on Wednesday. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.